Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for May 20, 2022, the Fake Interviews edition. And we begin with a story from the New York Times. Probably not too surprising that Wells Fargo is involved in fraud and trickery again. This time it's around fake interviews. A former executive of the Wealth Management Division said that employees, or rather diverse candidates who were interviewing for positions at the company would get interviews after the job had been promised to someone else. There's been a internal whistleblower report filed by a former employee, and of course the key word is now former employee. This former employee and others have said they were instructed to interview diverse candidates, but only to do so after the decision had been made who to hire. You know, you just can't beat Wells Fargo for their continued fraudulent treatment, but this time of its own employees. Next up, from Bloomberg, Janet Yellen says secondary sanctions on Russia were discussed at the G7 summit. So if you thought things were insane around sanctions, secondary sanctions will put an entire new level of robustness and insanity in terms of what you have to comply with for your sanctions. So get ready. If you haven't begun to prepare for this, I would suggest you would. Next up from the Washington Post, an incredibly troubling article about a 911 dispatcher in Buffalo who hung up, allegedly, on a Tops employee trapped inside the Buffalo supermarket during the Saturday's mass shooting that killed 10 people. The assistant manager said she called 911 and whispered to the dispatcher in hopes of alerting authorities that there was an active shooter at the store, and she was whispering because she was in fear for her life and hiding. And the dispatcher told her to speak up and said, "Why are you whispering?" and then hung up on her. This is just beyond belief that there would be that level of insensitivity and incompetence in a 911 dispatcher. So what's the compliance message for you? Well, you need to hire and train and monitor your people. Our final story comes to us on our Elon story of the day, is a great little graphic from the Wall Street Journal. I put it, of course, the link to it, but it shows where the deal could go from here with a flow chart. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it seems to fit where Elon Musk is with Twitter right now. So enjoy the visual. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.